Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 62 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, and today's episode is on how to help men and their mental health. This episode I really enjoy it because, as we know, mental health is quite stigmatized around men, because men are meant to be these strong characters who aren't supposed to be weak or anything, even though suffering from mental health condition isn't weakness. This is all quite ridiculous, as clinical psychology tends out to be quite white, middle class women, and they're not my words, they're the words of my clinical psychology lecturer, who's also a white middle class woman. And another article that I've read said that because of this disparity, and because there aren't many male clinical psychologists, this can only add to the burden of men suffering from mental health conditions. This episode should just be a bit helpful about how to help men, and I think even if you don't do clinical psychology, even if one of your male friends or family members is suffering from a mental health difficulty, then this should also be quite helpful. It's moving on to the psychology news section. It's we're from British Psychological Society Research Digest, and it's Saturday the 21st of November 2020 as I record this, and there's actually some great articles here. I'm actually going to do all 4 of them today. A study finds people who played video games for longer had greater well-being, but direction of causality isn't yet clear. Video games get blamed for a lot. There are long-standing debates about whether violence in video games leads to real-world aggression, or whether video game addiction is something we should be worried about. And some people have broader fears that more time spent on screen negatively affects our mental health and well-being. However, an increasing number of studies have failed to find much evidence to back up these kinds of concerns, but the field suffers from some pretty big limitations. In particular, studies often rely on people reporting their own time spent on consuming media, and we're notoriously unreliable at making these sort of estimates. Enter a new pre-screen published earlier this week. The researchers found that more time spent playing video games actually relates to greater well-being, though there are plenty of caveats to that finding. More on those later. But the more interesting part of the study is its methodology. Rather than relying on people reporting their own video game uses, the research established a rare collaboration with game companies in order to get precise data. So there's actually 2 things I want to say. I think this is really great in terms of the methodology, because it shows that psychology can actually work with video game companies to be able to get better findings, better data, because that's really important. Because if we want to make good conclusions, and conclusions that stand up to investigation and scrutiny, then we need really good methodology, and this is just brilliant. But it also shows that video game companies are also quite clever, because the video game companies obviously thought, right, if we cooperate, then we can disapprove of these myths, and hopefully we can make a bit more money. So it does show that video game companies are quite clever. So this is really good, and it also gets you to think about the other sort of applications of this, which I have no idea off the top of my head, but I think it's something really interesting to think about. I might actually do a reflection of this study in my clinical psychology log for university. Okay, so another one is, babies relax while listening to unfamiliar lullabies from other cultures. The controversial idea that there are universals in the ways we perceive music receives a boost in 2018, with the finding that people from 60 different countries were pretty good at judging a totally unfamiliar piece of music from another culture was intended to soothe a baby or to be danced. Now, new research involving some of the same team has revealed the babies themselves are relaxed when foreign lullabies that they have never heard before. The work suggests that across cultures, lullabies may share some similar acoustic features that will produce a common effect on infants. So again, really interesting, because as this is the Psychology World podcast, I'm always interested in cross-cultural stuff, the different bits about cultures. Yes, this is just really interesting that some bits can be cross-cultural, and I might actually, and this article I'm actually going to say for the Mental Psychology 3rd edition. Okay, so another one is, climate change appeals may be more effective when they're pessimistic, which I think actually sounds quite interesting. So there's no getting around the fact that climate change is an existential crisis of the highest order, but how best to communicate the threat is unclear. Too much pessimism and people become paralysed with anxiety, pushing thoughts about the crisis away altogether. Too much optimism, on the other hand, can lead to complacency. If things are going to be okay, why would you feel the need to engage? This tension is explored in a new study published in Humanities and Social Science Communications. The team finds that climate change appeals with pessimistic endings may actually boost people's beliefs that it's a problem and that they can do something to combat it. Yes, the findings of this research, I completely understand and I completely agree with it, because this actually feeds into persuasion. And one of the basic things of it, though, is that if you give people too much fear, then people go into denial or behaviour, but then if you give them not enough fear, then they don't do anything. Yes, that's really good. Okay, so with the last one, not too scary, not too tame. Horror experiences need to hit a sweet spot to be enjoyable. Okay, so you're walking through a dark, dingly house. Floorboards creak and you think you hear something moving in the shadows. Suddenly, an engine revs and a blood-splattered man wearing a pig's head lunges towards you. I presume this is a film. I have no idea. It just shows I don't watch horror films. Wearing a pig's head lunges at you with a chainsaw. You scream and run away, terrified perhaps. But it also sounds kind of fun, right? No, and I write horror, and I write borderline horror. I write borderline horror in my books. Okay. So we generally think of fear as a negative emotion, something that signals danger and which is unpleasant to experience. Yet many of us seek out situations that make us scared. Haunted fairground rides, scary video games and horror movies and novels. Now researchers have looked at exactly why we experience this fear. It's related to our enjoyment of this kind of recreational horror. The team finds that there's a sweet spot when it comes to create a scary but enjoyable experience. If you end up feeling too little scared or too much, then it's not quite as fun. Okay, that's actually really interesting. I'm actually going to read that for my own writing. Yeah, but I just thought that there were some really interesting articles. Hopefully you've enjoyed them. So let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. At a university, this week was a massive crunch week because our child development group presentation was due, but it actually turned out quite well. I actually quite enjoyed it. Thankfully, the university was really lenient about the presentation. Yes, that's actually going to be presented, even though it's a recording, in a few weeks' time, and then it'll be the Q&A. But yes, but group presentations. I know that most of you were university, or you've been to university, but I think we all know how stressful they are and how much nobody likes them. Who likes a group presentation? Yeah. But the other lecture that I did want to comment on was my biological psychology lecture this week, which I thought was really interesting because it was on the nervous system and how drugs affect the body. So that was really interesting, learning how marijuana and ecstasy and some of the other drugs affect that I thought was really good. Yep, and then the only other thing that I really wanted to mention was that I might be doing, because yesterday I got the December edition of the British Psychological Society, the Psychologist magazine. I said that completely wrong. And there's actually some quite good articles, so I might do an in-between episode at some point, commenting on them and just telling you about them, because I thought they were quite interesting. And I will fully admit, usually I just read the Psychologist magazine for the pictures and for the job adverts. And sometimes there's an article that catches my eye, mainly because the text is so small and the articles are so long, they don't tend to engage me too much. It's sort of no, that sounds interesting. It's 4 pages long with size 9 font. No, thank you. This time there were some really interesting articles that I do want to comment on and that I want to share with you all. So that I might do in the next few weeks. The next few weeks or so. But next week I will be recording the clinical psychology audiobook. So that I'm really looking forward to, because it will be the first audiobook I've recorded in my new audio booth, which is what I've been recording in. Which is where I am now, and I love it. It's absolutely brilliant. because, well, it's an audio booth and I finally got one, so I'm really happy about that. It only took a few hours for me and my dad to build, but it was really good. And I've actually been in it quite a lot this week, when I've been having my meetings with my child development presentation group, because it's a bit personal, but my dad's has been working nights this week, so because I don't want to disturb him when he's in bed, I've been in here for my meetings and practicals. And then the only other thing that I actually wanted to mention was that I've finished uploading my forensic psychology book, clinical psychology, formulation in psychotherapy, and cognitive psychology book to a particular platform. So you can now order them from your local libraries and your local bookstores, universities and bookstores, so which I'm really excited about. So all that you have to do is that you just have to request them at your local bookstores or read them for free at your local library. So I'm really excited about that, because I'm so happy that my books are now available to bookstores and libraries and even university libraries. And the sponsored product for today's episode is my Cognitive Psychology Second Edition book. So this book I really enjoy, and this book I think is really beneficial to people, because it really explains stuff like memory, thinking biases, how our memory works, the thinking biases, how emotion affects memory, and also the reliability of memory, and so many different other cognitive psychology bits, including the unconscious, which is one of my favourite sections. It's relatively short, but it goes into the cognitive psychology, why Freud was really good because he got us started thinking about it, but how he was wrong about the unconscious. So it's really, really interesting. I absolutely love the cognitive psychology book, and so many people have when they've emailed me, yes, you can get the ebook available on all major ebook retailers like Google Play, Kobo, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. You can get it for free at your local library, and that includes the print book and the ebook and the audiobook. And then you can get the audiobook available on all major audiobook. Yes, that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode, so we're going to be talking about how to help men and their mental health. Yes, as I've already said to that, by society and how it works and the stereotypes of men. For men coming forward, it's actually quite hard to talk about their mental health, because men, by their definition, are meant to be strong, emotionless. They're not meant to have problems. They're meant to be strong, and they're not meant to talk about their problems, because that's a sign of weakness and all the absolute rubbish, which I've never understood, because at the end of the day, men suffer from mental health and everything, and I just think it's so weird and it's so stupid that people actually believe that. And some people even try and enforce it, so that I think is just ridiculous. Okay then. Yes, but the reason why I'm talking about this now is because I didn't realise that when I actually picked the episode. It's only because I watched the news later on, was that last week, a couple of times you hear this, it was International Men's Day, which I was actually reading this article, and it was actually quite interesting, because International Men's Day isn't about celebrating men and everything. It's actually someone phrased it as is that International Men's Day was actually a call to action about trying to raise mental health issues, and just trying to get men to come forward to help them and support them, because at the end of the day, men still suffer from mental health. Because of these stereotypes, it can actually stop them from getting the help that they need, meaning that the difficulties get worse and worse because they're left untreated, which then goes into all types of rabbit holes, and this can just get really nasty quite quickly. So that is a massive shame, and that's what I actually want to do today's episode, because I know that quite a lot of women listen to this podcast, and I know that men talking to women about their mental health can actually be even more difficult. Probably because of another stereotype that men aren't meant to look weak in front of women and all that rubbish, but I also know that some of you are from the clinical psychology background, and other ones of you aren't. But to be honest, the entire point of today's episode is that by the end of today's episode, you should be able to get some actionable steps which will be able to help you if you've got friends or family, or even if you're seeing male patients, because at the end of the day, this is more aimed towards friends and family, but we all need to help and we all need to support each other. So let's dive into today's episode. So the first one is, and this one I know I've said before, but again, it's really, really good to actually keep coming back to this point. And next week's episode, I'm not doing anything to do with clinical psychology. Okay, so but the first one is, let them know you're there. So letting them know that you're there for them is really important because of these stereotypes, men do not think they can actually reach out to people. They cannot ask for help because of these stereotypes. If they ask out, they're going to look stupid, they're going to look weak, they're going to be ridiculed for it. But if you're a man or woman, if you actually say to them, right, I am here for you. If you have any problems, you're not weak, you're not stupid or anything. I am there for you. Just come and talk to me. That can be really powerful because even if they don't have a condition or a difficulty at that point, they still know in the future, oh yes, so and so said that I could talk to them. Maybe I should reach out. So that's still really important. And another point, and this is really important considering we are in lockdown in the UK and there's still a COVID-19 pandemic. Keep in touch. Don't underestimate the power of a text or phone call. Yes, this is what I've been doing once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Again, I know I need to get better at it, but I've been texting people. I've been texting people, just checking in with them, but just see if they're okay. Because if they're not, then I want to give them the opportunity to tell me that they're not, and that they can talk to me. So it seems really simple. All it takes is a quick text or even a phone call if you're feeling brave and if you're not busy. But at the end of the day, for people you really care about, you do make the time to text and you call them. Yes, just never underestimate how giving someone an opportunity, even if it's a slight opportunity, and even if it's one in disguise, just offer them because they might take it and then you might be able to help them. Okay, so another one is find out about local services and this links into a signposting. So I actually did this quite recently because in my clinical psychology module at the beginning at the beginning of 2020, which does feel like a million years ago. The clinical psychology lecturer, she signposted us to all of the different places, and that was really helpful because if someone did have a mental health difficulty, then all they needed to do was look on the slides and find the tons and the hundreds of different local mental health services for support, because we didn't know them. It's only actually I've only known about Samaritans and Mind, which are the UK's main ones since I've been doing clinical psychology now, and I've actually been focusing on clinical psychology. And because I know this is a global podcast, which I absolutely love, then I would just say spend 5-10 minutes looking at local mental health services, because if someone does have a mental health difficulty, then one of the best things you could do is just signpost them oh yeah, well, I know you're having a difficulty. Why don't you try reaching out to Mind or Samaritans, or I don't know, really, just any mental health services, because that could be really helpful. Because the last thing that you want is to know they have a difficulty of not being able to do anything about it, because that not only harms them, but it will harm you because you will feel really bad and really helpless, which is never a nice feeling. So another one is help them get help, reassure them, and let them know it's okay to seek help. So this links back to the other ones. This is really when it comes down to breaking the stereotypes. We need to break down these stereotypes. We need to let men know that it is okay to seek help. It is okay to have problems, even though, as you all know, I absolutely hate that term, because having a mental health condition is not a problem. Having a condition, having depression, anxiety, that's not a problem. It's a difficulty, and it's a condition that we need to help them overcome. So it's perfectly okay, and this is what we need to do. We need to reassure them. We need to say, right, you're not messed up. You are fine. And then if you're talking to a friend, a boyfriend, girlfriend, etc., then just say, you are not messed up. You're still the same wonderful person that I met, fell in love with. As you can tell, I've never had to do this speech, which is why it's coming out really weirdly. Anyway, but hopefully you will get the right idea. Now, the second to last one I really like. Get them to contact their GP, which is the general practitioner, which basically in the UK means your doctor. So get them to contact their doctor. Even do it for them. And the last one I really love. Offer to accompany them. So there's actually quite a few ones here. So first of all, help them to take their first step. Get them to contact their doctor, because that's a massive step. Or even do the really brave thing and actually do it for them. Just say, do you want me to do it? Chances are, because men are men, I know this. Okay, so they will actually say, no, I'm more than capable of doing it. Then I would just say, give them a few days and then say, right, I'll do it if you don't do it. And then that usually forces them to actually do it. It works great with my mum and dad, because when my dad doesn't want to do something, then my mum just says that works brilliantly. So I really, really recommend that. recommend that. And yes, you might feel like you're crossing a boundary, which you might do, but at the end of the day, you are helping them. You're helping look after them. You're caring for them, which is really, really important. And the next thing, though, which I think is really nice, is offer to accompany them. But as we know, this is quite an emotional time, because they found out that they've got a difficulty, they want to seek help. So this is going to be a very vulnerable time for them. But if you offer to spend your time with them and you support them, that is massive. I would love that. I would love that to happen to me if I needed it, because friends and family, they should want to do that, and I know that my parents would, but it'd be good if other people did as well. Well, because that shows you really care for them, and if that's for a friend, then you're going to really deepen that friendship because you're willing to sacrifice your time for that person. So that's really nice. But again, though, the most important point is look after yourself, please. Please don't focus on spending all your time looking after another person and you suffering yourself, because if you look after someone, I know it's really difficult and it can be quite traumatic and everything, but just you've got to have fun days, you've still got to have fun, you've still got to live your life, you've still got to enjoy it yourself. So please just look after your own mental health at the same time. So I really hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. I would love to know your thoughts, so please email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. Please tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi whiteley, or leave a comment on the channel at connorwhiteley.net. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.